What is up? Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful day. Back here with some more Resident Evil gameplay for you. And today I'm going to be making a follow-up video from one I made a few days ago, where basically in it I was talking about Leon and why I think some people are frustrated with him but not hating him necessarily. And one of the reasons I brought up was that his overexposure. But I had a lot of comments come in the comment section telling me that how can I say that Leon's overexposed when clearly Chris is the one who's overexposed. And they gave their reasons, and the irony is that I don't disagree with their reasons, but I don't think they're also complete. They don't add the context to the situation. So I figured, you know what, since so many people were confusing the thing, I figured I'd make a video to basically end the debate for good between Leon versus Chris in terms of who's the more overexposed character, because having context is very important. Because the replies of why Chris is overexposed are not wrong, but as I said, they're not complete. So I'm going to break it down to three categories that I use that I think are very important of how I determined all this. And I think they're easy to follow along. I'll try to make it as basic and simple to follow as possible. But let me know if you think that's the right way to do it or not, because at the end of the day, it's still my opinion, and I get it. But nonetheless, let's move forward. The three things I looked for are: not all games are created equal, not all roles are created equal, and what have you done for me lately? So without further ado, let's get right into it. So let's go with the first point I made: not all games are created equal. One of the big counter arguments I heard was that, well, Chris is more overexposed because he's in more games than Leon. And that is a true statement. He is in more games than Leon. But as you're going to hear me say multiple times, having context is very important. Because yes, he is in more games. But as I like to say for this topic, not all games are created equal. So how do we determine which games should matter and which games should count? Well, I've always come up with my own theory of, hey, I think the games that should matter and count are the mainline games, the ones that push the story forward. I'll accept the remakes, and the spin-off games that push the story forward. Now, that may be a little bit of a gray area, but you know what? I'll let the guys at Capcom themselves show it to you. So if you can see the image on the screen here, this is from Capcom's 40th anniversary exhibit. And this shows that the games that actually matter, the most important games of the Resident Evil franchise. As we can see here, we have all the main titles. Yes, Code of Veronica is a main title. I know some people still to this day think it's not. It is. So you have, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 being the latest one until Requiem comes out. And then you have the remakes, and yes, the remakes are their own kind of timeline. I know Capcom likes to merge both of them at the same time, and that's a them problem, not us. Unfortunately, we got to try to figure it out, but that's on them, not us. And then you have the two Revelations titles, the spin-offs. Those are the games that matter, that are going to be the ones we use to qualify for this. So if you don't see things like Mercenaries on a 3DS or Umbrella Chronicles, the Dark Side Chronicles, stuff like that. I saw some other games in there as well. They're fun games. I enjoy them, but they don't make the list. They're not as important. They don't matter as much. They are fun to play, but they're not in this. I'm sorry. Now, if you want to sit here and say, maybe some of those things could have been, well, at the end of the day, I don't make the rules. That's on Capcom. Capcom was the one that showed those games are the more important ones that push the narrative and push the story forward more in an effective way. So long story short, if it's not on that list or in that screenshot, it's just not going to be here. And I've been using that kind of same thing before I saw that image for a long time, for years. So if it's not there, it's just not going to be in there. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules. Well, maybe a little bit, but that's besides the point. Also, before I move on, get back the screenshot right on the screen one more time. You notice what else is on there? No one else is connected to all this? Dino Crisis. We're already seeing Onimusha is making a comeback. We know Devil May Cry is going to have another game eventually. Dino Crisis, it's there. It's written in the stars. It's going to happen, people. It's going to happen. The dinosaurs ain't going to be extinct for too much longer. It's going to happen. Right, Capcom? It better. Or else. But, moving on. My next topic I mentioned was that not all roles are created equal. So, another factual statement that people said in terms of why Chris is overexposed is that he has been in the last 4 mainline Resident Evil titles. And that is true. I can't argue against that. He has been in the last 4 titles from Resident Evil 5, 6, 7, and 8. But once again, adding context matters. Because what also is true is that Chris, if you compare the 4 OG characters of himself, Leon, Jill, and Claire, it's been the longest time since he's had a campaign of any sort, whether it's a spin-off, a remake, or a brand new title. His last one was 2012. Even Claire's got a more recent one than him. Yeah, imagine that. Claire actually has something where she's not the absolute worst in a category. Oh my god, there's actually respect for Claire Redfield. Holy crap. Who would have thought? But anyway, yeah, he hasn't had a campaign since Resident Evil 6. So, yes, he was in Resident Evil 7 and 8, but let's just be honest. He's barely in any of them. In 7, he's basically a cameo, and he's basically like, a cameo that you see at the end of a superhero movie. Like, he just shows up and appears. And yeah, he had the DLC, but who's really talking about that DLC? I mean, let's just be honest. If it was Jill who showed up at the end, and Jill had that DLC, would we be talking about it any different than if it was Chris? Maybe a little bit, just because I think more people would rather see Jill because she's been sidelined, but analyzing the DLC in its context, if it was just the same thing but different character, it wouldn't be too much of a positive, because most people don't even talk about that DLC, period. So it wasn't some substantial DLC. And yeah, in Village, he had a small playable segment. He's on the cover of the game. He had a few moments, but once again, he's barely in the game. So, analyzing since his campaign in Resident Evil 6, he shows up as a cameo in 7 in the game, has a DLC no one even remembers. That's, what was it, like, not even an hour? I mean, if you took your time, yeah, but you just played like normally, yeah, it's not going to take too long. And in Village, he has a small playable role. He's on the cover of the game, but, we could say that's false advertising there. He clearly wasn't the main character of that one. He's barely in these things. And just for comparison, Ada Wong, who is my all-time favorite Resident Evil character, wouldn't be in the main 4. She'd be that, I always say, that secret 5th character. Her DLC, Separate Ways, was more substantial than all of Chris's appearances in 7 and 8 combined in terms of length and quality. Let's just be honest. So, how is he overexposed then, I should say, if he's barely in these things? But I know what you're going to say next, even to that. I know what you're going to say beforehand. But look at the whole bigger picture here, is that if you look at the beginning of Resident Evil to now, he's been in a lot of things. And he has. And there is no argument there for that. Except for this. If you want to say Chris, throughout the entirety of Resident Evil's 30 years it's going to be, that he's had a lot of overexposure, I will not argue against that. You could say him and Leon were running neck and neck from the beginning of Resident Evil when it debuted to Resident Evil 6. But recall to my other topic, what have you done for me lately? Once again, I have to put in one of my favorite teams to insult myself again. Thank you guys. But it's like saying that, the Cowboys are this great football team because they have all these Super Bowls. They have 5 Super Bowls. Ignoring the fact that the last time they were even in one, let alone won one, was 30 years ago. Kind of ironic, 30 years, how that comes back there. My point being, it's not, no one wants to hear about the days where VHS tapes were big and awesome. They want to hear about what have you done for me lately. That's why when you look at teams in that division, clearly the superior team is the Eagles, not just because they've the defending Super Bowl champions, but they've won 2 Super Bowls in the last decade. They've been to 3, and they've clearly been the dominant team. So that's where I said it's a what have you done for me lately. How does that translate towards this situation with Leon and Chris? Ever since Resident Evil 6, we've had the RE Engine days. We're on the RE Engine. We've seen Resident Evil have kind of thrive, kind of have a huge boost in new fans, in terms of sales. They've never sold more than ever before in this period of time in Resident Evil. And since then, Who has dominated these things? You guessed it, Leon. In fact, I'll tell you this right now, Ethan has dominated it more than Chris, because Ethan was the main characters of 7 and Village. It wasn't Chris. Yeah, he was in it, but barely in it. Chris has barely been in any of this stuff. And if you want to be technical, he's had smaller roles than every major Resident Evil character. Ada's had bigger roles than him. Claire's had bigger roles than him. I don't think Claire's got over him in the last few years. And then, obviously Jill, has more roles than him. And then Leon's had more roles than him. If you look at the last 10 some years, since the RE Engine days really began, every major character has had more exposure than Chris. It's just that he's had the exposure in terms of having new content, but barely anything. If you blink, you miss it. So is that really overexposure? And keep in mind, if you still want to argue, well, he's in it, that's all that matters, he's overexposed. Well, I guess the late, great Stan Lee is overexposed for having all the cameos he had in the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. Yeah, no one was ever complaining about that, period. So why people complain about this, Chris barely being in it the last 10 years, while Leon has literally had both of his games he's in have been remakes and have him being the main character, which brings up to another point, which brings you up to Requiem. If Leon is said to be in it, people saying that he might have a similar role to Chris in terms of Village. Well, if it is, it'd be the first time Leon has ever been in a major Resident Evil game, or one of the main ones that I got to earlier, where he wasn't anything but the main character. Because he's always been the main character. He's never been a side character in anything. So how can Leon not be the overexposed guy when every time he's in a game, he's always the main discussion, while Chris is a guy who hasn't been the main discussion in a game since, 2012? Yeah. Hopefully I made these points clear, and it's not to be like a knock on Leon. I don't have anything against Leon. I like Leon more than Chris. He's my second favorite character, but I'm just trying to be fair. And at the end of the day, Leon is constantly getting more content where he's always the main character. And I didn't even mention the movies because he's always in that. And yes, you can say Chris has been in the last 2 ones too. I like those movies that actually use other characters outside the OG ones to give some other people a chance. But at the end of the day, look at these points. It just clearly shows that it's not the fact that how many games you've been in. It's what games have you been in. How much were you used in those games? What is your role? And when you compare all that, you clearly can see that Chris hasn't really been in major roles outside of being in the major game, but he has small roles compared to Leon always being in the major ones. Because, let's just be honest, he hasn't been in the remakes at all. He has had no remakes since the original back in 2002. Of the OG characters, he's the one that's been the longest time since he's had any sort of campaign, whether it's remake, original title, or spin-off. So yeah, where is this Chris overexposure again? I hope I made that point clear. And it's not that I don't want to see any of the OG characters or like Leon or something. I want them to do it right, but I just want the wealth to be spread. So, as I always like to say, that is my opinion. I want to hear your guys' opinion. What do you think about this? Do you honestly think Leon is more exposed than Chris, or do you still think Chris is? Let me know down in the comment section down below. But thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video, and hopefully I can see you guys back in the next one. Thanks, and I'll see you later. Peace.